the book called The Bridge at Remagen, at which I wrote about how the small group of Army engineers, infantrymen, and tankers managed to surprise the Germans by making the first crossing of the Rhine River since Napoleon in combat. And that book was so successful, it sold 650,000 copies, and they actually made a full-length motion picture depicting that event, starring George Siegel, Ben Gazzara, and Robert Vaughan, the man from Uncle, who played a German officer.
At the outset of the Second World War, 136 bridges spanned the Rhine River into the heart of Germany, as the Allies chased the fleeing Nazis back into the fatherland. These bridges were methodically destroyed by Allied bombers and by German demolition teams. On March 7, 1945, a single bridge remained. What had once been an insignificant railroad trestle was now the single most important objective in the European campaign. This was the bridge at Remagen. What happened at Remagen?
We gotta take the bridge.
Hold the bridge as long as possible.
I want those Germans.
The bridge at Remagen had to fall to the Allies or under them. David L. Wolper presents The Bridge at Remagen. Starring George Siegel as Lieutenant Hartman. He had the guts for war, but no stomach for it.
The quicker you boys get down there, quicker they blow the bridge, quicker we got maybe 6 enemy divisions corked in bottle. Hartman, boy, you do that for me, I promise you a unit citation.
Why, Major, sir, there's nothing my boys would appreciate more. Sir.
Ben Gazzara as Angel. If it shines, he'll steal it. If it moves, he'll kill it.
Know your trouble, Lieutenant?
You got no ambition.
You know something, Angel? You're a pig. I'm going out of this war rich. Or dead, Angel.
Robert Vaughan as Major Kruger. He was ordered to destroy the bridge. He was determined to defend it.
The most immediate problem, Vaughan, is not to blow the bridge up, but to keep it open.
But is it not true the Führer has ordered the bridge destroyed?
Bradford Dillman, Anna Gale, and guest star E.G. Marshall.
What makes that bridge so goddamn valuable?
Take that bridge and we shorten the war.
That's not a bridge, it's a death trap.
Want to explode the bridge? Get out of there! It's gonna blow!
What happened at Remagen?
Well, of course, Hollywood has its own ideas of the truth, and they dressed up the action. In 1945, when I was at Remagen Bridge, I never saw any women around. Hollywood had to introduce a love interest in order to dress it up for the public view. Actually, the movie helped me sell the book, so I have to say some nice things about the movie.
In anticipation of you arriving at the Robert Jackson Center last year, I went back into my own video archives, and there was a wonderful black and white documentary done by CBS on the bridge at Remagen, and they interviewed extensively a very young congressman named Ken Hechler.
The people of Remagen love their bridge. They loved it because it was an attraction for visitors from all over the countryside, and they loved to stroll across it on Sunday afternoons, to have picnics near the site of it. And they're right proud of the fact that the bridge was a strategic link between the German Ruhr on the north and the Saar-Moselle region on the south. Everybody knew that it would take a long amount of planning to cross the Rhine River, because this was the big natural barrier between the Siegfried Line and the straight shot toward Berlin. So even before we landed in Normandy, the Supreme Headquarters began to lay its strategic plan. The Americans got 5 tanks and about 120 infantrymen across the Remagen Bridge, a pretty thin force to hold a strategic point like that. But the next morning, all of the American troops within miles around converged on the bridgehead, and within 24 hours, 8,000 American soldiers had crossed the Remagen Bridge.
And they also interviewed a baseball player who was at the bridge at Remagen named Warren Spahn.
For a period of about 7 days, my unit, the Combat Engineer Battalion, worked hand in hand with a bridge construction outfit that was more or less in charge of erecting the dismembered pieces of iron and steel that were the upper part of the bridge. Ours was mainly the job of the flooring of the bridge. This was a railroad bridge, by the way. And we worked feverishly around the clock, 24 hours a day in different shifts, to build a Bailey Bridge, to get treadway on the bridge so that we could give the boys some support or get some equipment to them that were fighting so hard on the other side of the river. During this time, there was constantly periods where enemy aircraft was coming in, strafing the bridge, dropping bombs, trying to knock this bridge out. There was artillery fire. We stopped periodically to get under cover for these. One time, I remember, rather stupid of me, enemy aircraft came over, and as it did, I tried to find something to hide under, and it was the Bailey Bridge that we were constructing. And after the strafing was over, I realized that this is probably the worst place that I could have been, because if that bridge had been hit, I'd have been caught or trapped underneath there. But these are the things that you remember afterwards, at any rate. This was a constant turmoil. It was men racing against time, that we needed help for those fellows over there, and we were working real hard, equipment flying all over the place. Lieutenant Enos and I were down at the bridgehead, or at the western bank, and we were discussing a few little details, and he was pulling some of his men off, and I was just getting ready to send mine up, when suddenly we heard something like rifle fire, and we looked up in the air as if to look for aircraft, but instead there was dust coming up, rising from the bridge, and it seemed to totter a little, and it seemed to sway toward us, and then the center section of the bridge started to cave in. We had trucks up on the bridge that part of it was on the center section and part on the abutment side, so that this truck, I can remember, just folded up like an envelope. Pieces of equipment and pieces of the bridge were tumbling down, and I think our first reaction was to take cover, that either the bridge had been hit or for some reason that it was going to fall. And then just as rapidly as you can well imagine, that whole big structure disappeared in front of us. And now we're all running to see what we can do about fishing people out of the river. That it was almost a bubbling, roaring noise, that it almost seemed like the river itself had been turned into a boiling pot with all this debris falling in and men screaming, and you could see fellows were hurt and grasping for something to hang on to and going down the river, where eventually they were picked up. But ours was a case of real turmoil then.
Your book is very interesting and very readable, signed Harry S. Truman.